In 1994, archaeologists found Viking warrior remains, wearing armor that showed no battle damage, despite being buried with hundreds of weapon fragments around the grave. Modern ballistics tests on the armor proved it could stop bullets, tank shells, and even laser weapons. Today, I'm revealing the terrifying truth about armor that made death impossible. Dr. Astrid Larsen's team was excavating a 10th century burial mound near Trondheim when they discovered something that defied logic. The Viking warrior's armor remained in perfect condition. No dents, scratches, or battle damage, despite being surrounded by hundreds of broken weapon fragments from multiple battles. Carbon dating confirmed the warrior had lived through decades of warfare. Yet his armor looked freshly forged. The weapon fragments told a different story. Shattered swords, splintered axes, and crushed spearheads that had clearly struck this armor and been utterly destroyed upon impact. Norwegian military scientists subjected the armor to rigorous testing that should have destroyed any medieval protection. 9mm bullets flattened against the surface without leaving marks. .5 caliber sniper rounds crumpled like paper. Even armor-piercing tank shells simply bounced off harmlessly. The final test used experimental laser weaponry, designed to cut through modern military armor. The laser beam reflected off the Viking armor's surface like a mirror, causing no damage whatsoever. This 1,000-year-old protection was more advanced than anything in contemporary military arsenals. Spectrographic analysis revealed the armor contained isotopes that shouldn't exist naturally on Earth. The metal composition included elements arranged in crystalline structures that modern materials science cannot replicate or fully understand. The armor's molecular structure appeared to actively reorganize when struck, distributing impact energy across the entire surface instantly. This self-healing property meant that any damage was immediately repaired at the atomic level, making permanent harm impossible. Norse mythology credits the legendary dwarf smith, Dvalin, with creating armor for the gods that made them invincible in battle. The Prose Edda describes this protection as woven from starlight and hammered from the bones of mountains. Archaeological evidence suggests Dvalin may have been based on a real master craftsman who possessed metallurgical knowledge far beyond his era. The techniques described in mythological texts match the impossible properties found in the Trondheim armor discovery. Historical chronicles described Viking warriors who fought for hours while surrounded by enemies, emerging without a single wound despite being struck hundreds of times. These accounts were dismissed as exaggeration until the Trondheim discovery proved such protection was real. The Battle of Malden in 991 AD featured a Viking warrior who single-handedly held a bridge against 200 Anglo-Saxon soldiers. Contemporary accounts describe weapons breaking against his armor while he remained completely unharmed throughout the day-long battle. MIPSI physicists studying the armor believe it functions as a perfect energy sink, absorbing kinetic impact and converting it to harmless heat that dissipates instantly. This violates conservation of energy laws, but explains the armor's invincibility. The crystalline structure appears to create a quantum field that redirects incoming force into parallel dimensions, effectively making the wearer exist slightly outside normal physical reality where conventional weapons cannot affect them. Enemy armies, facing warriors in invincible armor, experienced psychological breakdown before physical combat began. Knowing that no weapon could harm their opponents, soldiers would flee or surrender rather than engage in hopeless battle. This psychological advantage was as valuable as the physical protection. Viking raiders wearing invincible armor could defeat vastly superior numbers through fear alone, making their actual invincibility secondary to its psychological impact. Creating invincible armor required rare earth elements, specific astronomical alignments during forging, and metallurgical techniques that combined chemistry with what medieval sources describe as runic magic. The process took years to complete a single suit. Only master smiths, who had apprenticed for decades, could successfully forge invincible armor. The knowledge was passed through oral tradition and died out completely when Viking culture was Christianized around 1100 AD. Medieval kingdoms recognized that warriors in invincible armor posed an existential threat to established military hierarchies. If common soldiers could become invincible, traditional concepts of noble warrior classes would become meaningless. A coordinated campaign by European royalty targeted Viking smiths who possessed armor-making knowledge. By 1150 AD, all known examples of invincible armor had been confiscated and destroyed, and the craftsmen executed for practicing diabolic arts. Despite being physically invincible, the armor had one crucial limitation. It couldn't protect against indirect attacks. Warriors could be knocked unconscious by blunt force trauma or killed through suffocation without the armor itself being damaged. Medieval tacticians developed specialized techniques for defeating invincible warriors. Pit traps, drowning, poison gas, and crushing devices that immobilized rather than damaged. These methods eventually rendered invincible armor tactically obsolete. Since 1994, classified defense programs have spent billions attempting to reverse engineer Viking invincible armor. Success would revolutionize military protection and render conventional weapons obsolete overnight. Current efforts focus on nanotechnology and metamaterials that could replicate the armor's energy absorption properties. However, the quantum-level engineering required remains beyond current technological capabilities. Military philosophers debate whether truly invincible armor would end warfare or make it infinitely more brutal. If soldiers cannot be killed, conflicts could theoretically last forever, with no decisive victory possible. The Vikings may have recognized this problem and deliberately limited invincible armor production. Making every warrior invincible would have fundamentally broken the concept of warfare as a means of conflict resolution. Intelligence sources suggest that additional examples of Viking invincible armor exist in classified government collections and private museums worldwide. These pieces are deliberately kept secret to prevent their properties from being studied and replicated. Rumors persist of wealthy collectors who own complete suits of invincible armor, using them for private security, or selling access to governments interested in studying the technology. The black market value of such armor would be incalculable. Invincible armor technology could revolutionize civilian safety applications. Workers in dangerous industries, emergency responders, and space explorers could benefit from protection that makes injury physically impossible. The challenge lies not just in recreating the armor's invincibility, but in understanding the medieval manufacturing process that achieved results modern technology cannot match. Sometimes the most advanced solutions require looking backward, not forward. The Viking armor that made warriors completely invincible proves that our ancestors achieved impossibilities we're still trying to understand. In a world where death was commonplace, they created protection that made it obsolete. The greatest armor ever forged wasn't made yesterday. It was perfected 1,000 years ago.